Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here, and welcome to the second entry in our Community Cast series. So again, this is a series where you, the people, submit replays to me, and you know what? We have a good time, and we cast them. So thank you to Bart Fitzgerald and OMG Ninjas, who actually sent me this game. They're going to be playing the Dwarves. Bart, more specifically, is going to be using Belgar Ironhammer, and OMG Ninjas is going to be playing with High King Thorgrim. So they're actually going to be facing off against the Foul Vampire Count. So without further ado, let's get right into the army composition. So in the front line here for Bart, he has some Longbeards with great weapons, backed up, of course, by the Grumbling Guard. So the Grumbling Guard, obviously a pretty good choice, and but they did get a slight nerf in the patch, actually. So again, they went from that 30% vigor buff to 18, I think. It was either 18 or 15%, a bit of a nerf there. So still a very, very good unit, and I think in all rights, very essential to the matchup still. So actually, the stat difference is pretty big as well. So they actually have 47 melee defense compared to the 40 of the regular Longbeards, and on top of that, they have a bit higher melee attack, and their weapon strength is the same. But still, the stats are pretty good there. So aside from that, he does have some Longbeards in the wings. These guys are obviously going to be used to, block up any Black Knights or Dire Wolves or anything like that that's trying to sneak into the back line. Though for Bart's army, he doesn't really have any, that many squishy spots. He has the Peak Gate Guard here as well, and a group of Hammers of some very, very hard-hitting troops. So these guys will definitely thrive against Grave Guard and units like that, but they'll definitely struggle against Cryptors. So that's kind of one of the vulnerabilities of Bart's army, is that Cryptors would be very, very strong here, but against Grave Guard, it is going to do some serious work. On top of that, he does have Runesmith, and that looks like it for his army. So back here, he also does have a group of Dragonback Slayers. So again, he brought mostly an elite infantry corps. Doesn't look like they have too many missiles across their entire faction, aside from these two Quarrelers here, which will definitely be one of the best tools they have against Cryptors, Mortis Engines, as well as Vargeist and things like that. So as far as OMG Ninja's army, he has two groups of Quarrelers here. He has Longbeards with great weapons, and the Warriors are Dragonfire Pass. I really like these guys. I feel like even in matchups where you might not think they're traditionally good, against troops that are heavily armored, I feel like they're just so cost effective for their stats. They actually have 50 melee defense. They also have an anti-infantry bonus of, I believe, 6, which isn't terrible. So I really like this pick. Very, very sturdy unit. And again, they do fire damage. And there are quite a few units on the Vampire Count's roster that are weak to fire. So definitely like that as well. Additional Longbeards over here. He also has some Miners with blasting charges, who they're actually kind of interesting. I usually don't bring them myself, but I've tried them in a few matches, and they can do pretty well for disrupting the charges of like elite troops. For example, if there's like a group of Black Orcs coming in and they get like a nice firing line, and then you countercharge them, a lot of the Black Orcs will miss out in the initial charge. So a bit of a kind of a hidden bonus of them, and definitely, if microed well, they can be pretty good. So in the back line here, he does have the Grumbling Guard as well. It looks like Bart's Slayers, the Dragonback Slayers over here, and it looks like OMG Ninjas also have a group of Dragonback Slayers for himself. So they also did bring one Godblobber, which in the most recent patch, the Bretonnian DLC, did get a bit of a nerf. So the stats, across the board are the same. However, it does cost 100 more than it originally did. So let's get right into the Vampire Count's army and see what they got. So the Vampire Counts, they do have two Black Knights over here. Black Knights are, pretty much just fodder cav, I would say. I mean, not as, fodder as Direwolves, but still, they don't have like a ton of armor piercing, but they still do have an anti-infantry bonus, I think. No, so it just actually says that in the tooltip. They don't actually have a built-in anti-infantry bonus. I guess they're just saying that essentially they're meant against infantry. But still, if he's able to get these guys around and pressure those Quarrelers, or maybe get on that, Godblobber, they'll definitely pay their dues. But aside from that, if they just kind of engage on Longbeards or any of the Longbeards with great weapons who now have charge defense against large, they're definitely not going to do very well for themselves. Yes. Aside from that, we got two Vargeist. Vargeist, they hit really hard. They have 109 weapon strength, it looks like, when buffed. But let's go ahead and here and see if we can get a look at their actual armor piercing. So the armor piercing damage is 25. So they're not going to do too great against armor for, how expensive they are. But still, if you can find the squishy spot, get on some of these Quarrelers, or maybe even dive on a Runesmith. Because Runesmiths, I guess they all have so much armor, like all the Dwarvish leadership. So it's going to be a little tricky finding a home for them. But if they can get in there and disrupt missile units or, focus heroic units, they still hit hard enough that they'll do pretty well for themselves. So aside from that, he just has a bunch of, or the Vampire Counts have a ton of zombies in the front line. So it looks like just across both lines, a ton of zombies. They have a Mortis Engine, which I really, really like. I think a Mortis Engine is just one of the most essential units in all matchups. If the Dwarves are able to focus it down with Quarrelers, that'll be really good for them, because the Mortis Engine does only have 40 armor. So it's a relatively squishy unit. It did get an HP nerf, but this game might have actually been before the patch. I think it was sent to me a day before the patch, so I don't know if the changes are in effect yet. Aside from that, there are some Cairn Wraiths here, and they're okay against the Dwarves. They do have armor piercing, but again, guys, on that same coin, they do magic damage, so you can see that. So they're going to have 25% of their damage mitigated. Granted, they do have 40 weapon strength and pretty heavy armor piercing. If we take a look here, let's go ahead and see. Yeah, it's 32, so that's actually really heavy armor piercing, but still, the magic damage and the Rune of Wrath and Ruin is going to destroy them. But I also do really like the Cryptors from the Vampire players, so very good pick there. They pretty much have identical armies. I mean, this gentleman does have a ton of standard Graveguard, who are probably going to be a bit of an anvil. So, what you want to do with them is just send them in the front and let the Mortis Engine do its draining. He does have a bunch of Cryptors. He has a Banshee as well. He does have Manfred von Karstein on foot. I actually haven't seen Manfred on foot in a long time. Bit of a interesting choice there, but you know, Manfred's always a force to be reckoned with, and it looks like they do have Winds of Death. Does he actually have Curse of Years? So it looks like he did bring the full Vampire Counts spell roster. So, and we do have a Vlad von Karstein over here who is pretty good. Master of Beguilement, using it on, you know, Belegar or High King Thorgrim is going to be pretty strong. So without further ado, let's get right down to business. So interestingly enough, with the way this deployment started, there's this actual natural terrain here, which is going to be very, very helpful for the Dwarves. So what they can probably do is have one of them deploy right here, and the other one can easily just plug up this flank. It kind of takes away an entire angle of attack. So you can see these Quarrelers are kind of sitting in the front waiting for their opponents to get in here and do some work, and it looks like Bart's forces, or Clan Engrind, is advancing to form a battle line in front of those Quarrelers. So they've kind of allocated each of them to kind of defend a side, definitely working pretty well together and communicating as to, you know, who's going to defend what, and you know, definitely we're going to see how these Dragonback Slayers perform in the back line. So if the Slayers are able to just get on these Vargheists, these Vargheists will just get put in a trash can so hard. They only have 10 armor, and the Dragonback Slayers have 48 weapon strength, plus a pretty substantial anti-large bonus. Let's go ahead and take a look at what it is. So plus 24 against large. So they will just do so much damage against these Vargheists who have, only, again, like I mentioned, only 10 armor. They'll literally die within, you know, probably like 10 seconds if they fight those Dragonback Slayers. So very, very well played by Bart, positioning those Dragonback Slayers to protect the Godblobber. And it looks like the Godblobber's doing some, you know, decent work on some of these Graveguard over here, which is probably one of the most ideal targets for them to shoot at. So looks like the Black Knights are kind of sneaking around the flank, so hopefully they're aware of this, but it looks like they do have some Longbeards over here, a group of Slayers, and then a second group of Longbeards coming to protect. And this group of Slayers is obviously just keeping their eyes on these Vargheists over here. So one of the Vampire Counts players is running over here. They're actually taking a little bit of Quarreler fire on some of these Cryptors, not doing too much damage because it looks like a lot of the arrows are kind of being obstructed by this terrain right here. But now it looks like they're going to switch on to some of these guys, and they're actually looking to overload this flank, which is a pretty good idea in my opinion. It's very, very tough for the Dwarves to reposition once they're kind of in this defensive turtle formation like this, because if both of the Vampire Counts come around and just slam down on this flank, which is relatively light, you can see that there's some Longbeards right here, but most of their kind of core army is right here. So it looks like Bart is actually, instead of going around and repositioning, it looks like he's going to chase and try and, you know, smash into the flank of these vampires. And look how much damage that Godblobber has done. It's actually brought this one group down to critical binding and actually taking out half of their roster. So it's almost already paid for itself in taking out this group of Graveguards. So very, very well played in defending that and, you know, getting as much value as possible. So the Black Knights right here are obviously really, really having a hard on for this Godblobber, wanting to take it out, but it's going to be tricky. Definitely not going to get in there easy with all of these defenses. But it looks like OMG's Ninja's army is reforming ranks here. You can see this Runesmith here, and it looks like he has 2 Runesmiths, so these ethereal units are in for a really, really bad day. Like 1 Rune of Wrath and Rune will bring them down like 40-50% of their HP, no problem. So the Quarrelers are repositioning, and then it looks like the Vampire Counts actually decided to engage right here. So some of Bart's troops have engaged. They're going to fight some of these zombies here, and, you know, the zombies obviously are pretty pathetic in melee, and the Dwarf Infantry are pretty strong as well, so they're going to do their thing. But you can see a really aggressive Spirit Leech going off on Belegar. So he's taking a ton of damage from Manfred's Spirit Leech, and again, Manfred does have access to the lore of vampires, so this is a very tough start for Bart. But Belegar is a very, very sturdy lord. It looks like actually when buffed right now he has 150 armor, so pretty crazy stuff here. So the vampires sending in a lot of their fodder units, probably trying to, you know, wear these dwarves out a little bit. But with the Grumbling Guard here, and if this is indeed the pre-nerf Grumbling Guard, it's going to be really, really hard to wear these guys out. So on the far side, these Vampire Counts are still getting around, getting it ready to engage. And these Black Knights, very, very well played by the Vampire Counts players, are going to come in and slam into the back of Bart's army. But again, Bart has a very, very tough, like, Death Star DAWI army. But these Grumbling Guard, you know, they're facing the wrong way, and they don't have charge defense against large in the first place. So this is going to be a really, really rough charge for them. But it looks like the Black Knights stop. This one group slams into the back of those Longbeards. Very, very well played there. But these ones look like they're just chilling, trying to figure out where they want to go. And it looks like he decides to try and get in here and try and sneak onto that Godblobber or get back onto these Quarrelers. Because again, the Quarrelers on this side are really doing devastating damage to that Mortis engine. Not devastating, but they are applying pressure. But still, Black Knights get a great charge against the Dwarves in here. This is going to be a very tough situation. But again, there's a lot of hammers and things like that. So though it looks really bad, they didn't take a lot of damage. And once they turn around and start fighting, it's going to be really tough. So you can see the Vampire Counts front line here. The Cryptors are actually taking quite a bit of damage against units you wouldn't think they would, you know, be good against. But he does use Aspect of the Dread Knight. But guys, Longbeards are immune to terror, immune to psychology. So it's not going to be that effective. And I think the hammers might be as well. I'm actually kind of curious about that. But still, you can see these Black Knights are starting to take a little bit of damage. And Bart actually gets a nice rear charge with those Longbeards there to sandwich them in and essentially spell their doom. And of course the Dragonback Slayers are coming as well. So over here you can see the Vargeist are just going absolutely ham. They're just fighting some of these Dragonback Slayers, but the Slayers are, again, like I mentioned earlier, going to cut these guys to pieces. So you can see some of these Vargeist going down. A very cool scenic shot to see them like fighting in the flames like that. It would be interesting actually if the flames actually did damage them, but I don't think it will. So, but the Dragonback Slayers still at 60 models. You can see these Vargeist actually didn't take too much damage, so very, very well played there. But actually that one group there did take about 40% of their HP, but they were able to shut down the Goblobber for the most part. So hopefully OMG Ninjas is on top of this and ready to protect it, because these Vargeist are looking for round 2 for sure. Over here in this fight, it's very, very pitched. These Cryptors are actually pushing forward, and a lot of the Dwarf forces look like they're being overwhelmed. Thorgrim is in the front line. He does have some fairly tattered Longbeards with Grey Opens here, but again, the Skeleton Warriors and these Graveguard here are being very, very sturdy with the support of the Mortis Engine, but very, very well played by OMG Ninjas, focusing down this Mortis Engine, and essentially it's starting to crumble, and if he's able to get this, I think he could certainly change the tide of the battle. You can see Vlad von Karstein has kind of penetrated the dwarf line, and he's starting to summon zombies on top of these coilers. And also, it looks like these Vargeist are definitely looking for some targets. So the Vampire player doing a pretty good tactic here. So he sends the Vargeist in here, and then he's going to park this other group and probably engage on these coilers, because again, there's only one group of Slayers here, and a lot of these Cryptors are just force pathing through these dwarves. They've actually penetrated the line, and actually these Hex Wraiths, or what are they? They're Hex Wraiths, right? The Karen Wraiths have done a pretty good job, and the Invocation of Nehek is keeping them pretty sturdy. So they get through here, and they're putting a lot of pressure. So a very, very wild fight right now. The Slayers over here are obviously going to cut down these Vargeist, but this other group here is just kind of perching and waiting. And these Black Knights were able to escape the battle over here, so it looks like they're going to do some pretty good work. And man, these coilers are having a pretty rough time now getting sandwiched, and a lot of these troops on this side are definitely getting overwhelmed by the undead. So let's go ahead and check the other side. It looks like Bart's troops are starting to stabilize a little bit. He does have some Longbeard 75 models here. These Peak Gate Guard are just so elite. I feel like, and they actually do magic damage too. So against this Banshee right here and some of these other ethereal units, these Karen Wraiths are just getting put in a trash can. So incredibly hard. So pretty well played here, you know, by all parties. Definitely a very, very fun match. You can see these dudes. He's dancing up there doing his thing. Oh, he was actually coming down for attack. I wasn't sure what he was doing there. But anyways, looks like the Vampire's forces over here are kind of crumbling a little bit. Manfred's in decent shape, but, you know, they're probably, you know, I have a feeling this Vampire force is going to go down pretty quickly here. And these Karen Wraiths and the Rune of Wrath and Ruin perpetually pressuring these guys. Very, very good stuff. And so over here, it's a little bit more of a wild fight. And you guys can see the balance of power is still quite even, like right in the middle just about. And these Dragonback Slayers were able to deal with these Vargeist. You can see they're actually down to 2 models right now. So the aerial threat in many ways has been dealt with. And now that these Dragonback Slayers are free, they're probably going to get in here and do some pretty good work against these Cryptors, which is going to be pretty essential for, you know, turning the tide of this battle. The Vampire counts have lost their Mortis Engine, which is huge. So those Coilers definitely paid their dues. They might have paid with their lives, but it was definitely a worthy sacrifice. So in here, the Dragonback Slayers are pushing in, and they actually do a pretty good job cutting through fodder. And, you know, this Necromancer and Vlad are actually starting to get, you know, pushed back by a lot of these dwarf troops. Either that, or they're all just trying to zerg on High King Thorgrim over here, which it looks to be the case. They do summon some zombies to kind of protect their flank against some of these dwarf troops. So let's go ahead and take a big overhead view. So he has some miners left here. He does have High King Thorgrim, who is actually starting to get surrounded. But again, these Karen Wraiths do magic damage, and he does have pretty substantial magic resistance, as well as really, right now, actually 180 armor when buffed, which is pretty insane. But aside from that, not too much left. There's a Runesmith here. He does have a group of Coilers over here, as well as a group of, I believe, Longbeards with Grey Weapons. But the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass continuing to fight, and their flame damage is going to be pretty good. I believe Cryptors are weak to fire, so an extra 20% there definitely doesn't hurt. So let's go back over here and check on Bart's forces. It looks like they are doing pretty good. The Cryptors are starting to get worn down. They have weak binding. Some of these Graveguard, it looks like there was a little bit of a graphic glitch there, but these zombies are starting to go, of course. And one of the issues is once Manfred starts getting, you know, the beat down here from a lot of these guys, you can see Belegar, he's definitely pissed off from being Spirit Leeched earlier. He's putting up a pretty good fight against Manfred, and you can see Manfred, you know, tucking tail and running, and Belegar is definitely looking to grudge this up a little bit. So Belegar, yeah, actually, even though starting the fight at half life, he's still in really good shape. So, you know, Manfred's going to get headbutted here. He puts a little bit of a move on Belegar, but Belegar doesn't care. He's going to get back and just continue this chase. You can see he actually has 32 move speed, and Manfred actually looks like he has 38, so not that big of a difference. But man, Manfred is getting caught here. The dwarves are able to head him off, and it looks like Belegar and some of his buddies are definitely going to lay the pimp slapping. Looks like Manfred tries a bit of a Sparta kick there, but again, guys, he has 300 HP, down below 300 now, but it looks like his regeneration is just barely keeping him in the fight. But he's probably not long for this world, especially with Belegar here. So, or Belegar Oakenshield, whatever you guys want to call him. Definitely some good stuff. So a lot of the Vampire's troops over here are crumbling. Looks like Manfred does crumble as well. He's out of the picture, and it looks like this Vampire Count's army is done for. So definitely, you know, Bart still has a very healthy core. I mean, the Grumbling Guard here in really good shape. The Runesmith is in good shape. Belegar took a beating, but, you know, again, the DAWI are a proud people. And oh my goodness, does he have 270 armor right now? How is that possible? Oh, I guess one of his buffs here. So yes, Revenge Incarnate gives melee attack and armor piercing. This gives this. How does he have so much armor? What is doing that? So I guess he got the Master Rune of Groth One Eye, and it looks like, why is his armor so high? I'm not sure what that is, so maybe one of you guys can explain that to me, like how his armor got so incredibly high. So over here, it looks like the dwarf players are actually able to clean up on both sides. The zombies here, and this looks so bad for the DAWI. I mean, it looked like they were being overwhelmed. Some of the Black Knights from this battle were coming into rear charge here, but High King Thorgrim somehow, even after being surrounded, is able to survive, which is just absolutely insane. So very, very well played to both players. I think when the Dragonback Slayers were able to, clean up that back line and deal with the Vargeist, then the Slayers were able to push forward and really assist in that main fight. So it looks like there's some zombies left here, some other troops over here, but it looks like that's all she wrote. So let's go ahead and fast forward here just to get through the remainder of the battle. I'm not sure how there's still 3 minutes and 30 seconds left. I know there's some zombies. Are they running from these zombies? Not sure what's going on here, but these guys, yeah, it looks like they're dead, and yeah, that's weird. Why was the timer? Because usually, obviously, it would end at 0, but anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at the breakdown, guys. So pretty cool change in the recent patch. I can click through all of their armies now, which is just such a nice boon here. So OMGs, look at this, 159 kills on these miners. I think a lot of those were on zombies because they were fighting in the back line, but it's really hard to tell how well things actually perform against the vampires because of all the zombie summons. And if this was indeed pre-patched, then they were summoning a ton of zombies because again the cooldown hadn't been nerfed yet. So still, good performance. The Quarreler is definitely some MVPs there. That Mortis Engine, had it lived, would have definitely changed the tide of the battle. And being able to apply some pressure, using those Slayers in the back line and some other auxiliary units like those miners to protect those Quarrelers was really, really nice stuff. So very well played by OMG Ninjas. For Bart's army, it was just one of those really sturdy kind of, just going straight for the dome piece DAWI armies, just hammers, just elite infantry. And I was actually surprised at how well it performed against, I believe he was fighting, he was fighting Vlad's army. So I was surprised how well it performed against these Cryptors. But again, the Cryptors were actually not with his army. Rather, they were over fighting against OMG's army. So a bit of a split force there. So again, he was missing about 2,000 resources in that fight. But actually, was that the case? Because did they both have Mortis Engines? But it looks like maybe their armies got mixed up because the Mortis Engine was actually fighting over with, I think, no, that was actually with Manfred's army. So yeah, I was incorrect there, but I think some of their troops might have gotten mixed in with one another. But regardless, very well played. That hammer and anvil, the Bellegar took a beating, but he kept fighting like a champ. Actually, if you guys know how he had so much armor, let me know, because I didn't think like that the Revenge Incarnate gives a ton of armor, but maybe it does. But anyways, for the vampire counts, I didn't like the Karen Wraith choice. I think that was really rough, and also the Black Knights I think were a bit of a bad choice as well. But still, the Black Knights can be okay. I mean, they can pressure Quarrelers, and you saw they got some pretty good charges, but even when they did charge in, they weren't able to do much against that DAWI armor. It was definitely a little tough there. Good performance from the Cryptors, but, also they did a pretty good job fighting them. They were able to get Slayers on them and, all that good stuff. So for Vlad's army, a lot of Cryptors, the Corpse Cart was definitely keeping those troops fighting, and some of those Karen Wraiths performed okay. I mean, 26 kills, but still Runesmiths just absolutely destroy those. High King Thorgrim does magic damage. The Peak Gate Guard do magic damage, so that was just a really, really rough day for those ethereal units. So, well played to Maddie and Necros as well, which is a really fun game. Always good to see the DAWI going ham. So thanks again to Bart and OMG Ninjas for submitting that. And stay tuned, guys. More games coming soon.